26 years, one check, and a handful of clients. That's how our guest launched a PR firm that's still marching forward on the same rough startup road he walked in 2001. And it's still going strong 25 years later. Picture this: a bag of change, a cold cup of coffee, and a lingering question that hits everyone who has ever been let go. What's next? For this entrepreneur, it was the raw, gnawing fear of the unknown that followed a sudden layoff. The office had turned off his desk. The email notification read, "You're terminated." And the next day, he was staring at a life that seemed to have lost its direction. It's the kind of pivot that feels like stepping into a pitch black room and hoping you can find the switch. But there's the twist. Instead of drowning in doubt, he chose to work harder than anyone had ever expected and focus with laser precision. He flipped the script, took no comfort in the what if, and built a playground for the bold. It was the relentless grind and the razor-sharp focus that turned a shaky start into a fortress of experience. 16, 17, payoff. After more than 2 decades of battle, his firm isn't just surviving, it's thriving. 26 Reasons of Skepticism, 2001 to now. A business model that can stand the test of swings and pivots. The numbers speaks for themselves, but the real reward is the quiet confidence of owning a place that still feels like somebody's beating chest. Today, we are diving into the secret sauce that kept his practice alive through market crashes, social media revolutions, and the wild, unpredictable storms of the PR world. From the first cold check to a company that became a mainstay for brands across the spectrum, he will reveal the one strategy that any business owners can apply if they're willing to do it the way he did. Buckle up, because the next few minutes will uncover how a stubborn focus can turn a life hinge into launchpad. Hello, Brian. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. It's a beautiful day here in Southern California. All is well. Got in early morning. Zoom calls already completed with some clients, and I now get to spend time with you.
Great stuff. Brian, before we start then, do you have a favorite quote, something that motivates you, inspires you, you would like to share with our audience?
I do. I mean, they're very cheesy, so I'll preface with that. But I'm a Star Wars kid. I'm a Star Wars nerd. And to this day, nothing has ever let me down. Then try not, do, or do not. There is no try. It is a creed that I think is completely underestimated. And every so often you hear the word try come out of someone's mouth, and you have to recite them this specific line from a very, very fascinating character in Star Wars. And the other is the Nike motto of just do it. I try and keep things simple in my life, keep them linear as much as possible. And those two sort of creeds, those two sayings are most important.
Indeed, indeed. And you have a amazing underdog story here, and I loved it when I first got introduced with you, and I thought, okay, that man has tons of nights spent by himself thinking about different aspects of life, and he overcame with all these challenges. Would you take our listeners back to the day when you were fired? How were you feeling? What was you thinking? What was it felt like walking on the footpath by yourself, thinking that you have almost lost all the incoming, income for your family?
Yeah, it was a few days of unknown, because I had just returned from a work trip, and it seemed like some things were changing. And the owner of the company, I would go in the day before I was let go, and I was trying to get his attention, and he kept blowing me off and this and that. And so the next day I came in, and he called me into the office, and he said that I would, he appreciated my service. He handed me an envelope, and I went back and cleared out my office. One of the people I worked with came in that day. She came to see me for something. I told her I was no longer there. She ran out. She was crying. And then 20 minutes later, I had a bouquet of flowers from her sent to me. So I wrapped up all my stuff, took these flowers, and went home, and it's that feeling of complete unknown, complete loss in the aspect of there's this massive hole. What am I going to do now? There was
Mm,
all the emotions, anger, animosity, sadness, shock. It wasn't something that I didn't, I felt something was coming. So it wasn't the
mm.
complete, like, you know, complete shock. There was
Out
shock
of the
in the
blue.
moment,
Yeah. Mm,
but sometimes you sense these things happening. And so I went home and just took a couple days to just do nothing. There was, there was the check he gave me, and there was moments of just peace of mind as well, as far as like, okay, what am I going to do now? Um,
mm,
I didn't panic though. That was the one thing I knew. I had built my career to this point, and so there was no need to panic. As yeah, this was, late 2000. So it
mm,
was a world that there was still so much opportunity. There were there were just different aspects of life that I still felt I could jump into, that I tried to take the positive out of. But I do recall the day quite well. There are days in your life that you remember more than others, obviously. The day to
indeed.
day of life doesn't stick, but key moments certainly do.
Indeed. Indeed, it does. What were you actually doing with this organization where you were working? Like, what was your trade basically?
Yeah, I was the head of PR and marketing for the company. It was an entertainment company, of
Mm,
which I handled all aspects of public relations, media relations, and everything to do with the outward sort of messaging of the company and its products and the people involved.
perfect. So when you came back home, I mean, you were not panicking, but your mindset must be what I'm going to do next, right? What encouraged you to think like, oh, I don't want to search for another job. I want to do something of my own. What was there already you have learned in your career that encouraged you to move for being an entrepreneur?
Well, the entrepreneurial part came by accident. So I
Mm,
did look for another job. I took interviews with a couple of companies over the next month, but it didn't seem like the right fit. It felt like I was going to companies sort of beneath the company that I just worked at. It didn't make sense. And then I got a couple phone calls from people who wanted to hire me to
mm,
represent them as a publicist.
mm,
And so there was one, and there was another, and then there was a third. And then I started to do the numbers. Well, if I charge this much to do this much work for each of these people, and two people in a company, and that's just three, and I'm going to make this much, and it's going to be X amount of work for me to do. Well, what if
mm,
I have 10 clients? What if I have 20
mm.
clients? And then all of a sudden I realized I'm just going to go on my own. And the house that I lived in, I converted one of the rooms into my office, and I just started working, and I started going.
What was the number look like? Give us ballpark. Like, what were you thinking? Okay, if I make if I charge $1,000 to one customer and there are three, so I'm making 3,000. Because back in 2000, at that time when you left your job, I don't know how much inflations were there, what was going on in the markets. Give our listeners a taste of the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, if I was making, it was around in that ballpark where it was like 5,000 a month. Let's say it was 5,000 a month times 12. Well, that was more than I was being paid at the previous position I had, right? So then it was just like, well, these three people are going to pay me this amount, and it's more than I was making in my previous job. And my overhead was quite low. I mean, it was literally the rent in the house I lived in. It was insurance. Um, it was, but that was it. It was a quite low overhead. So I realized with that amount, making more, so on and so forth, if I took on more clients, it was just more profit and more opportunity. And then I could bring on help, so on and so forth. But it was in that ballpark of the numbers you're talking about that ultimately made me go, there's something here. And then, there were three more meetings I took. I took a final interview right before I started my company with another PR firm that I'd know. And they were looking to potentially bring someone on. And it was a 2-hour interview. I'll never forget. And the first hour was them grilling me. And then it switched in my head. And the next hour was me grilling them. and just picking their brains as to how to run a PR firm. And they answered all my questions. Another phone call was with a very good friend of mine who was an independent publicist, and he fed me information. And then my third meeting was with a very, very successful music publicist who I had known from my writing days when I used to freelance. And he brought me into the office and he literally opened his books and showed me how to run a PR firm. Now I knew, he had 10 publicists and assistants. It was a huge, huge company in that regard. And I knew the size and scope wasn't of interest, but just the openness, just the giving of these three entities, that my interview and then a friend of mine and then this friend of mine. And I've always tried to pay that forward as best as I can, is that there's no hoarding, there's giving, givers gain. And so those three meetings were very key for me to figure out, hey, I can do this. I can start my own firm. I can go. I can find my niche. And I can make this work. Do I lost you?
Sorry,
There we go.
my bad. Right. So I usually ask my guest about, how did you find your first customer? But I think in your case, you already had 3 customers, and that motivated you to go on, starting a organization. But let me change that question a little bit then. You started the business, you already had the customer, but I guess in order to scale, you still need more customers, right? What was the strategies you started putting in to capture more leads and gain more customers at that point of time? And tell our listeners now in 2026, what strategies you're still using from the back of the time, and then what improvement you have done or what different strategies now you implement in your day to day.
What I do then, or how I obtain customers, has not changed in 26 years. My work and my clients are my best selling. I gain clients from the clients I have. When I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, doing it well, and I'm accomplishing the goals for my clients, and they get calls, emails, what have you, from people going, hey, I'm looking for a publicist, then I'm referred. And that's been that way for 26 years. Your clients are your best sales tool, because if you're doing a great job for them, they are going to let others know. And that has never changed. So from those first 3 clients, there were meetings with others, and slowly I began to pick out clients. And in a 26-year period, I've had over 550 clients in all capacities. So it's always, I've never spent $1 on advertising. It's all been word of mouth, and I just trust, and you have ebbs and flows. You're never comfortable. Sometimes I have a lot of work, sometimes it diminishes. Like you mentioned in your intro, there's ups and downs, there's market crashes, there's a pandemic, there's all types of things out of your control that you have to swim through and guide through, good times and bad. And now we're in an AI world where we're seeing something that's competition, and there's a fear or embrace aspect of AI. So it's always been the word of mouth, and I've always been very appreciative.
Yeah. And I think for your niche works because you are into service business, and service businesses primarily very distinctly run by trust. Because if your customers trust you on what you are delivering to them based on your promises, that gives them confidence that if they're putting their name forward to refer you to someone, you will not disappoint them. And that is one of the biggest challenges right now for the organization which could not deliver on their promises. So I totally get that, why it worked out for you. So Brian, take us. So let me give you some stats then. 28% of our listeners are from states, and I'm assuming that they all know what publicist means. I wasn't very aware of this particular word. I came to, when I was studying in Oxford, that's where I met a friend who comes from a music background, and he said to me that I have a photo shoot today at London Eye, and my publicist has made sure that it is in the evening so that I don't miss any class. That's the conversation which sort of like I remember that,
Yeah.
okay, what is the publicist? Would you be able to give our listeners a little bit of understanding what publicist means and what they do?
To put it in its simplest form, I make people and companies famous, right? I'm the conduit to take said person, said company, said event, and give it notoriety. My daily grind is to be in touch with media people, both domestic and international, to build relationships, to feed them information on my clients, to help them with their needs. And at the same time, I'm dealing with my clients to garner information, work on press releases, work on pitches, set up interviews, set up photo shoots to help their needs. So I'm the middleman. I'm the middle person between the media, the public, and the clientele. And so it's very vital that you're always on in the aspect of whoever you're talking to is someone important and someone that that you're working with and treated, you know, in that way.
Great stuff. And what's the value, or how do you calculate or quantify the value you deliver?
Yeah.
Why I want to understand it is, um, a lot of founders who listen to our show, they lack when it comes to um, understanding how to market themselves as a brand.
Yeah.
They understand their product, they love it inside out, and they spend nights in, nights out to create a pixel perfect product.
Yeah.
But when it comes to their own identity, they're not that much aware that how much it affects when you go out, because people don't invest in product as such. They invest into the builders of the product, they invest
Yeah.
into the team who are behind these products, right? That's the first criteria when it comes to raising capital. And then when you go out and you try to recruit people, people want to work with people whom they already know, whom they already understand, whom they have already seen somewhere, right? So personal branding is kind of mandatory at certain level nowadays, right? How does your organization delivers the value to your customers? So and I would also love to understand how much do you actually charge for what kind of services, because that will give our listeners an idea. If they are into that stage,
Yeah.
would it be good for them to connect with Brian and sort of take it from there?
Yeah. I'll start with that first. I mean, dependent on I work within people's budgets, but usually it's between a few thousand to several thousand a month. So you're spending between 3 to 5 potentially a month on a PR firm per se. Now working backwards from what you asked. Publicity is under the umbrella of marketing. You have advertising, you have publicity, you have different aspects. Advertising, you can do straight ROI, spend money. You run an ad, you see what the return is and if it's valuable. Publicity is perception versus reality. I can work with a client, talk to two different people, and after I do some work, one person might say, I've seen your client everywhere, and the other might say, I don't know who your client is. And the things that I stress to my clientele is, with 8 billion people in the world, over 8 billion, not everyone knows who you are. And so every day someone discovers you. We now live in a world of algorithms and getting your name, your event, your product, whatever it is, into the algorithms, right? And there's paid ways to do it. We all know of SEO and everything of that level. My job is to introduce you to an audience of which you see the return based on the response. If we get articles written about you and people are talking about you. Now, in this day and age, it also takes time. Viral moments are few and far between. They don't happen as often as they used to, as far as on a grander scale. But certainly viral moments happen all the time. Someone picks up something and a few million people will see it. There's three things that go on when we're putting out when we're putting out a notice, a product, whatever it is. The three things are a positive response, a negative response, or absolutely nothing. So let's start with the positive response. We want to get a mention, we want to get whatever it is, it gets picked up, people read it, people respond positively. That's fantastic. Mission accomplished. The negative response, it gets written about, but it's not liked, and people disdain, and now you're dealing with the negativity. Well, twofold on the negative is you've gotten attention, so now what do you do with it? How do you respond? And you strategize that. And also you might have a wave of people that come in and defend you, which creates more opportunity. So negatives aren't necessarily bad. They they're growing experiences. You learn from those, and you take from them what you can, and you strategize accordingly. And then there's nothing, where you put something out into the ethos and nothing happens. To me, that's the worst of them all, because you're not getting any feedback, and whatever your messaging is wasn't important enough to be liked or disliked. It just sort of sits in the ethos. And so you have to go back and you have to fine tune whatever that message is and really figure out what it's going to take to get a response. And so my focus is on those three and then what we do with them accordingly. And so it's perception versus reality. That's what a publicist works with. Ultimately, I'm doing what I can for my clients to keep them happy so they see growth, so they achieve the goals that we've outlined. And then we move forward.
Perfect. That sounds very straightforward. What kind of exercise you do with your clients before you take them on, and what sort of strategies typically or in general you use in order to get them more visibility? For example, do you have like a workshop with your client to understand what their goals, objectives are, what kind of messaging they're trying to give out there, and what they want to achieve from this particular campaign, or is there something else? And then once you figure that out, what you exactly do in terms of what sort of strategies you want to implement for them so that they can get maximum visibility.
Yeah, I mean, it starts with phone calls and Zoom calls and really just getting to know each other. So the first period of time together, it's back and forth. It's discussions. It's really feeling out what it is we're going to focus on. But it's just constant communication, whether it's like this, a video call or on the phone or emails and texts. It's just that's what we do. We focus on really getting to know our clients as best we can, as quickly as we can, but always learning as the process moves along. And so, with that in mind, it's just making the client comfortable and getting as much information from them as quickly as possible.
Great stuff. So, Brian, take us through a story of one of your clients who came to you asking for help, and he or she was not very well known, maybe not 1% achieving of their objective or goals. And then they came to you, you helped them out, and then within the set time frame, which could be 6 months, a year, or 2 years, they got all the objectives and goals
Yeah.
achieved. And how was it like?
I mean, I can't think of one. I've had so many in that regard, and I've been very fortunate. So I'm going to keep it focused on sort of an overall with said clientele in the capacity you're speaking of. But they'll come to me, we'll get started, and then we're just looking for small victories at first, and really relishing on those small victories, whether it's a placement, an interview, a photo shoot, a discussion, an introduction, whatever it is. And then we just sort of, I call it, building on the small victories and then puzzle piecing, taking different pieces of the puzzle, putting them together, creating ultimately the puzzle we want to see. And when it happens, it's amazing. It's beautiful. But it takes both sides. I always say the worst client I can ever have, and I've had my share, are people who hire me, snap their finger, write the check, deposit the money, and then feel like the next day they should be famous. And it just doesn't work. It takes time and it takes effort, and it's a team effort. So if we're working together well, we'll see growth. But if the expectation is that I'm going to do everything and they're just going to sit back and not participate, it will fail. Ultimately, it will fail. And so those clients over the years that I've had success with, we've worked together to achieve the goals that they've set out.
Indeed, very interesting. Great stuff. So, Brian, talk to us more about how does it looks in terms of numbers. Let's say one of the listeners from Founders Podcast come to you, say, Brian, I've heard your pod with Ash. I am a founder. I have a small startup. We are 10 to 15 people working together. Our product is primarily for, let's say, B2B. Let's say, I don't know. They have a platform where they provide companies LMS, learning management system for corporate employees, right? And they want to get well known into corporates so that they can go and talk about their product. And this particular individual has a lot of experience in human resource and management people management, leadership, things like that. How much you would charge this particular individual, and how long would the process takes, and what kind of output this person could expect?
Yeah, I mean, I can't put an exact number on it because every client has a different budget, and I've learned to work within budgets, whether it's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 more. I work within the budgets of my clientele. So it's roughly in that ballpark. And then it's ultimately, you know, garnering as much information from them to put together the game plan. So that's the first thing we do right off the bat. And then it's strategies. It's really getting into what it is they're looking to accomplish and how I can help them accomplish those goals. And going back to the team aspect of like what you said with employees and whatnot, it's working with everyone that I need to work with within the team to accomplish these goals. So I think it's really key because you have tons of different personalities. Every person and company I deal with has a completely different personality and
Mm,
a completely different communication skill set, or even how they like to communicate, whether it's, DMs, whether it's text, whether it's email, whether it's they just want to talk. So you have
mm.
to be flexible and adjust in my position to the clients, how they want to be talked to, how they want to communicate, what it is they're looking to accomplish. And you really have to focus on what their needs are and how to.
Got it. Now let's talk about our listeners who are in their 9 to 5, and they are desperate to get into the founder space, right? They don't have any budget, but they want to get the word out. What advice you would give them so that they can themselves go out,
Yeah.
get themselves publicized and well known in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a 9 to 5 job, still do that job, but that job's from 9 to 5, right? So in the
Mm,
evenings, focus on what it is you're trying to accomplish. Early in the mornings, use the time outside of your job, and it takes sacrifice. You're going to sacrifice things. You might have to sacrifice that dinner date. You might sacrifice that trip. You might have to sacrifice something in order to accomplish what you want to be an entrepreneur. I think sacrifice is the biggest aspect that people either completely understand or don't think is real. And sacrifice is vital. There's plenty of things I've had to sacrifice to get where I'm at. And so you have to really take that into consideration if you want to be an entrepreneur, because it isn't a nine
mm.
to five job. But that being said, if you have one, by all means, stick with it, because the 9 to 5 job is ultimately going to fund what it is you're looking to.
Any particular tips you want to give them? Is there any platform where they can sign up to get more, um, uh, I don't know, articles written for them? Is there any particular SaaS platforms they can go to where they could find some lucrative opportunities, things like that?
I think AI, it gives you great opportunity to educate yourself. I
Mm,
think once you understand AI and get to learn it and get to use it, you're gonna feed it questions that you're looking for the answers for. So if you're looking to do specific things, definitely use AI in that regard. I can't think of anything better right now that AI isn't a part of or doesn't have. Everyone wants to focus on the negatives of AI, but I think there's tremendous positives that we can all use that will make our daily life a lot easier. And that's one of them. I want to educate myself on this. Where's the information? And when you ask, whatever program you use, there's so many, and they're growing, and they're obviously having tremendous positive impact. Like to focus on that you can use these programs to help you with those needs.
sure, sure. Thanks, Brian, for your insightful knowledge. We have a quickfire round now. We have 6 quickfire questions. At
Yeah.
any stage you think you don't want to answer any of them, just give me a skip, and then we can move on to the next one.
Let's do it.
Okay, great stuff. What are the top 3 strategies to generate more leads in 2026?
I think being aggressive, being in constant contact, and gaining new contacts to then ultimately, create more leads. It's about communication.
What book would you recommend to our audience, and why?
Oof. Ooh, I'm a John Krakauer enthusiast. He writes nonfiction about events that have taken place. So anything by John Krakauer is my go.
What's one attribute or characteristic in your mind of a successful founder?
The ability to be uncomfortable in the aspect of visualize your toes barely reaching the bottom of the pool and your head just above the water, and knowing that this uncomfortability is a necessity for
What's your favorite personal productivity tool or habit?
yoga.
What's a new or a crazy business idea you would love to pursue if you had time?
If I had time, it would involve music in some capacity. What it would be is for me to really saunter into. My passion is music and my love for it. And I had a music scholarship a long time ago. So singing, it would be fascinating to really deep dive into different aspects of that of what the future is in regards to music.
And last but not least, what's an interesting or fun fact about you that most people don't know?
I was in choir. I was a choir boy growing up. So, and I had a music scholarship, and I sang in a choir and an event in Flagstaff, Arizona at university, where we did Handel's Messiah from front to back. So I still know all four parts to the Hallelujah chorus of Handel's Messiah.
Perfect. That's nice. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story and unpacking 2 decades of building this business and some of the ups and downs. People want to check out the website. People want to get in touch with you. What's the best way to do it?
BSGPR.com.
Great stuff. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your inspiring journey. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on Founders Podcast.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate it.